Hey, what's up, everyone? This is Mick O from Camera Bits, and we're doing Workflow Wednesday Live. This week, I have a very special guest to talk about workflow. It's Jamie Rose from Momenta Workshops. Jamie is a very talented educator and photographer, and storyteller, and marketer, and PR exec, and motivational speaker, and really just an amazing person and all the things. So let's bring her in right now. Yeah, hey Jamie, how you doing?
Hey, Mick, I'm good. Nice to see you from across the state.
I know it's been a while. It's been a while. So yeah, as I said, you're part of Momenta Workshops, and you guys you do a lot of things. Momenta Workshops specifically focuses on helping storytellers work with nonprofits and humanitarian organizations. Is that right?
That's our biggest workshop lineup is the project series, which is focused on working with nonprofits. So that is one of it. Momento Workshops is owned by Momenta Group. So Momenta Group LLC has Momenta Workshops as one division, Momenta Creative, which does creative services for different companies, as you may have heard, Mick. And and then we also have we oversee a nonprofit which is called Wildfire Media, and Momenta Workshops exclusively does documentary storytelling programs around the world. So we have 1 day programs that are focused on business skills and career development. Then we have our 1 week programs, which are typically in the United States, that work with nonprofit organizations. And then the project series also has 2 week international programs as well. And then we have Momenta Select, which is our travel series. So that's travel documentary workshops, which is definitely a lot of fun, but you're also doing a lot of work. So it's very early mornings to get that golden hour.
So a much larger organization than even I had even grasped. So that's for the intro on that. There's a lot of stuff even I didn't know. So thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
And so, yeah, we are going to talk a little bit about workflow and how you use photo mechanic in your workflow workshop settings.
Okay.
And you said you were going to show a little bit about like what you do with ingest and creating folders with color classes and things like that.
Sure. Yeah, we
Okay.
can definitely dive into that. So, for everyone who's listening, Vic knows that since the inception of Momenta Workshops, we have been using Photo Mechanic mainly because all of the company founders and the majority of our instructors use it on a daily basis when they're doing any kind of photo coverage. It's just the fastest piece of your workflow to get you working on the images in your processing software faster. So typically, when you're on a Momento workshop program, all of our students have a 1 hour editing session with one of our instructors. So you sit down one on one, and we go through the entire day's take, soup to nuts, the good, the bad, and the ugly, all of that good stuff. So it is challenging because some people are shooting like 1,000+ pictures a day, so we
Mm-hmm.
have to get through a lot of images very quickly in that hour to really be able to dive down and look at which images are doing really well, what areas need to be worked on, where challenges need to be addressed. And our focus in that regard is to be able to look at a whole contact sheet very quickly, be able to scroll through those images very quickly, but also be able to highlight the ones that we really like, pull them off to the side, and then dive deep into them. And doing all that in an hour with 1,000+ photos is difficult if you're using any other program other than Photo Mechanic. So especially because most of our students are coming in and they're shooting these like gorgeous Sony cameras, or these really big DSLRs that are making these huge files. You just don't have time to sit there and wait for every single image to render. So what we want to do is be able to have something that comes up quickly. We can really dive in, and we can really do that in that hour. So as part of the program, we offer a 1 hour session on just how to use the basics of photo mechanic. And that starts with the ingest dialog box. So our biggest focus is to get people right in the door and kind of explain how it all works to them.
Mm-hmm.
And the way that I give this particular presentation is when I will never forget the first time I saw photo mechanic. I was in, as part of my background is I was a press corps photographer in Washington, D.C. So I worked in the Capitol and the White House, and I was in the Capitol, in like the photographers gallery, as it's called, and I was sitting there and somebody was sitting next to me, and I looked over and I watched them pull up all of their pictures instantly, scroll through really fast and start like tagging and highlighting. And I was like, what is happening with your computer right now? And he's like, oh my God, this is photo mechanic. You've got to try it. And I swear within probably 6 months, maybe a year from that version of photo mechanic, when it really started to take off in like the early aughts, everybody except for I think Reuters, because they have their own proprietary software, was using photo mechanic in their daily workflow, because deadlines are minutes. Yep. In that environment. I mean, you just don't have enough time to wait. And then we started to see that integration happening across all industries. Wedding photographers were needing to get those first look pictures out the night of, and they just didn't have the time to really do that, laborious type of post-production. So I always explain ingest to people about like, this is what it was like in the dark ages. And the ingest dialog box has 5, I can't say that word or you'll get the E on it. So 5 really awesome features that's just in there that like didn't happen before. And so do you want me to share my screen?
Sure, that'd be great.
Okay. So I'll pull up my photo mechanic right here. And when we go into that ingest dialog box, we really try to go through what it means from, like reading a book. When you come in from understanding where the disks are, I explained that the incremental ingest is like one of the greatest features ever that was added to that version of photo mechanic, because, the hunting and pecking of where I left off the last time I dropped my cards, especially like on a wedding or a big event, or you're doing a sporting event or something like that, and you're doing multiple drops, that was so incredibly helpful. Mm-hmm. The source directory file, of course, is great. And then we really kind of dive into that primary and secondary destinations. So letting people know that they can do that blind copy to back up their images, or allowing them to, pick that primary destination through any of these particular areas. The, filter files are great. Then the IPTC, having to explain to people that you had to like open up every picture in Photoshop, I think at the time, and then Bridge came out, and that was like one way that you could kind of do it, but this was so much more seamless. Yep. And like, of the features, incremental ingest, metadata templates with the IPTC, the rename ingested photos, oh my God, so helpful. The sequencer was so helpful. I mean, all of it is just so great. And then the unmount source disk after ingest was like the greatest thing for Mac users ever, because I can't tell you how many times prior to photo mechanic, like yanking an SD card out, or, seat the other ones out, and like having the little warning box come up to be like, I'm sorry,
right,
you may have corrupted your files because you are doing this wrong. So that was just incredible. In terms of the IPTC template, I was predominantly on, like, I worked pretty much on contract with the New York Times, but I did have some other clients, and the ability to be able to very quickly filter, assignment numbers into the IPTC that could go right in, get the images up there faster, but also to be able to say like, oh, I'm actually working for this PR company that I worked for before as well. So I can put that in my source code or wherever it is, to be able to just have that so quickly instead of having to hunt and individually type everything in. So one of the things that we do is we actually give a caption XMP file to all of our students before they walk in the door. We just say, please just have it on your desktop. You don't have to use it. Please don't try to open it. It's not going to do anything. Just do that. So we typically say during that lecture, everybody just open up your caption. So we pull that up. And, usually there's a generic photo caption, like these photos were taken at. This is Caitlin Wong's that I just saved very quickly before our discussion here. But it also includes all the keywords. It says, where the event has taken place. Everything's filled in ahead of time. Plus we've got all of our copyright information. And we've always found that to be just incredibly helpful to get people understanding how their captions can be used. We teach them a little bit about variables when they're in there. Then, we rename it based on our naming sequence. And then, we explain to them too, like one of the things that was so great about photo mechanic for like, say, press photographers is I had multiple assignments a day. So I would have to go in the morning and I would be able to save an entire caption, close, and know that the second I got back to my desk, I could just open it back up. It was all ready to go. I didn't have to retype it in. I could save the next assignment's information all in one fell swoop. And it just saves so much time. And we try to explain that to our students as well. Like you might be doing 2 different nonprofit assignments this week. So maybe you want to create 2 different caption sets for those. This is how you can use that ingest dialog box.
And being able to do that in advance is just, it's fast in doing it, but doing it in advance is always the best.
That's so great. Yeah. And then we get into, we really pull everybody into the contact sheet during this demonstration. And we just kind of go over the whole thing, what they're going to see as they're moving forward. The next thing that we do after we kind of explain the ingest dialog box, actually, I should say this is the first thing we do, is we go into preferences. And we give each person a color. So like the fun show pictures that are going to go into like the fun workshop stuff is there. All the Momenta instructors use Momenta green, and cool. That's number 5. And then the students use number 1, which is pink. So then they can go in, pre-edit their pictures, let us know what they're thinking with that color code, but they're not deleting it. We're not creating separate folders or separate libraries like you have to do in, Adobe or something like that. This is a way that we can just kind of see how they think. And then when we come up to a picture that we've put green, they've put pink, they might be right next to each other. We can compare, which we'll talk about later. The other thing that I really like to do as an instructor that I would recommend other instructors do is in that contact sheet, I always put the variables of, say, aperture, shutter, ISO, make of camera, kind of, I think I just use that as an example. I try to make sure that, if I want to look at a contact sheet just to like take a quick gander at what they were doing with their camera, it's so much easier to do it on the contact sheet itself. And so for those of you at home, this is where that comes up, where I can see the file name and the aperture and the shutter and that ISO. And so it's just so helpful as a teaching tool to say like, hey, by the way, did you notice that you didn't change your ISO all day long? Or you've used the same f-stop all day long. Maybe we should work on that for tomorrow. And then the last thing I always do is go to caching and tell them to bump the caching up as high as possible, because it's really not as high as possible. Now that you guys created version 6, it's kind of insane. But for what we do, but for anyone who's doing anything else. And in fact, Mick, I would love to ask you a question.
Yes.
What do you recommend? What's the highest disk caching size that most people on, like, say, MacBook Air or MacBook Pro in the field should be using?
We really try to make the defaults sort of the most popular. It really depends on per system. We know that higher is not always faster. If you have a huge cache and your processors can't handle it, then that might actually slow you down. So we put a lot of thought into making the defaults sort of our basic recommendations, but it really depends on your machine.
Okay. And you can always just call Camera Bits and ask.
Yeah, that's one of our favorite things to do. We have our customer support. We'll be happy to go over that with you on like you can say, this is what my machine is. These are the specs. This is how much memory I have. This is what I'm running, and they can work with you on that.
Awesome. Cool. And then I try to explain to people as well the launching platform. Like they can decide, this is we have a lot of people who have come in and they've only used Lightroom ever because like it came with their camera or, that's just what they took a class on and they feel comfortable with. And so we explain to them like, look, you can go in and choose what program you want to do to actually edit your images in post. And so you don't have to just use Lightroom for everything. This is how it seamlessly integrates. And just that ability to have that quick key of, Command E right into a library or a catalog and in Lightroom is really helpful. I personally use Photoshop, so that's where it goes for me. And then the last part that we kind of get into is the contact sheet itself, which is so intuitive especially for anybody who did shoot film. I think that the fact that you guys have preserved the look and feel of an actual contact sheet on a light box is very helpful for them. And we, usually will go through and explain like, this is what happens during your rollover. I really love the magnifying feature, especially when we're talking to students about how you can really zoom in on an individual picture and how it can make it so much easier for an editor to just say like, is that picture sharp? I don't know. Maybe, I think so. But it's not really a streaming friendly tool necessarily right now, but right. The magnifying is really great. Then we explain, just kind of go all the way across. I think that for a lot of the photographers who are shooting two cameras, if you've got two of them slung around your shoulders, being able to explain to them like the ability to just go up here and sort by arrangement and capture time has always been so helpful. It's kind of like that light bulb moment of, oh, that's really nice. I don't have to just go through the pictures that I shot on each card and then go back to the start of my day again. And then we kind of talk about the widgets. We go right into the difference between how people use stars versus colors versus tags, and really kind of break it down we like to use colors just because it's very visual. When we pop into a student's, contact sheet, we can see if they've, selected this picture, but the editor from the day before selected those, that type of a thing. The gallery of work that you're seeing right now here is our student, our attendees' images. So these are Momenta Workshop pictures. And so hence it's not a chronological contact sheet necessarily. And then we go into the preview, which is, this is very helpful to be able to see the IPTC information the metadata of like, ISO, shutter speed, et cetera. But when we go into info, we'll be able to say like, oh, okay, so we had an issue with that person who didn't upload their caption information correctly. Let's make sure that we can check that because, typically the photographers are shooting a ton of pictures and we have 15 students that we're putting together their images to go into a final slideshow that happens on the last day of our workshop. It's this big public party. We want to make certain that all of that is properly segmented for each student in the slideshow so that IPTC is just gold for us. And especially after 12 years, there's a lot of people and there's a lot of images. So we want to make certain that like, Dana Pugh's picture doesn't get confused with Sarah May's picture, for example. And then I guess lastly, my favorite part of the photo mechanic workflow is when we really get to dive into that preview. So we kind of go over what all of this, what all of this does and, kind of highlight each one of the features that are up here. I personally, kind of keep my thumbnail strip away because I just really want to see the pictures as big as possible. And however, I really, really, this is it. This is key. This is, some cameras, unfortunately, when they were using, like, let's say a different program, didn't bring in all the IPTC information, but here we can pull this one up. So this feature is so helpful to me. The camera info that comes in, we can see exactly when the image, was shot. We can see what camera they were using. But more than anything, what we're really looking for is like the way that the photographer's brain is thinking when they're working, because that's what the editing process, the editorial process with an instructor is so important to us. We can say, you have a little, like, if the motion blur here wasn't intentional, well, you're shooting at a 40th of a second. You're gonna get that with a moving vehicle or a moving person. So maybe next time you might want to go up to 1/25th of a second. Obviously that's exactly what she was intending. But
right.
we can also see, like, okay, you're shooting on aperture priority or something like that. That's probably what was kind of messing with you. You might, in this situation, want to go to manual or, whatever is in this information here. And I've always very much enjoyed the editorial crop option because I love that it so seamlessly integrates with Lightroom and Photoshop. So when you pull it into those two programs, your crop is there, but you could still mess with it just a little bit. It's not that permanent crop. And as a teaching tool, I think that's so helpful because there's a really amazing photo editor out there. His name's Chip Mowry, and he's like one of the most incredible human beings in the world. Ex-Navy SEAL, multiple tours in Vietnam, just like the coolest, most amazing guy ever. And then he became a photo editor at Providence Journal and Indianapolis Star. Anyway, he has this theory called he calls it the additive method of cropping. And it's such a great teaching tool. So Chip, I am totally letting everybody know your secrets here. I do not think you will care. But the idea that you can come in and say, okay, this smile, this beautiful face, that's where we're starting from. Now let's see what we need. Like, okay, we obviously have a frame here. There's a word. So maybe we're just going to keep adding a little bit of the crop. Now, do we need the whole thing here? Do we want to move it around? Maybe we just need that photo, but let's keep going. Let's see what else is in this frame. Oh, there's something cool over here. There's a bike. That's a nice balance. Let's keep going a little wider. We're going to keep adding a little bit of method of crop here. Cool. Do we need that blue thing? Maybe not. Oh, we're cutting off her foot. So we got to keep that foot in there. And the blue is balanced, so that works. But if it were Chip and he was really trying to give you a hard time, let's say we decided we didn't need those blue things. He would say, like, so here we go. All right, we're going to get that blue thing out of the way. That's it. Okay, great. Why didn't you shoot it like this? And then he would talk to you about moving your feet and all that other good stuff. But with this particular one, obviously the full frame is stunning and gorgeous. And this is Uday's, and it's just a lovely picture. But that's where I think the cropping tool can be so helpful in a teaching environment, because it just really shows you how you can crop, but it's not destructive, obviously. And it's not like in Lightroom where it takes a while for it to go back to the full frame and you have to click a bunch of buttons. We're just kind of like moving it around a little bit. And then, obviously Zoom is really helpful just because we can kind of zoom in and be like, is that sharp? Okay, nope, move on. And then we know how to move on. The other thing that I really enjoy about is about this particular feature that you guys built in is the side-by-side comparison. I mean, it's so helpful when looking at similars, especially. And from a teaching perspective, there's a lot of times where, like, we'll tag an image that we really like, but they like another one that's, kind of closer, a little similar. So we can pull it up side by side and say, okay, what is it about this picture that you like versus right or left? And then it helps the photographers really start to, experience that visual library that verbal library, sorry, of
Mhm.
words to describe the pictures, what they're looking for, why they shot it in a particular way, what makes it important to them. And then we can compare our picture on the other side and say, okay, I like this picture because of this reason. And I really feel like this is a little bit more powerful because of X, Y, and Z. And I mean, that honestly is like my favorite teaching tool of
Mhm.
after obviously after all this info that's just at the ready and very visible. I just love to be able to slide that over and be like, okay, let's talk. Let's just talk about these two images and really dive into what makes it a good edit. This is also incredibly helpful for pacing.
Mhm.
When we talk about pacing our slideshows or pacing the presentation, it's so nice to be able to see what the transitions from the images can be working out to, so we can kind of compare, like, do we want this classroom versus this one, do we want to transition into a classroom environment, things like that. So I think, and then with a click of a button you go back to the beginning and we're all set.
That's such a great point. I actually never thought about using that in the slideshow context, but that makes total sense.
Yeah, it's a great program, I gotta say. Y'all done a good job. It makes my
Thanks.
job a lot easier, that's for sure.
Well, that's what we like to hear. Let's take a look at the chat and see if we have any questions. Oh, you have some fans in the chat here in the YouTube. Syed says, "Yay, Jamie."
Well, hi,
Srijita says, "Hi,
Syed. Nice to
Jamie."
see you. Oh, hi,
Ellen
Shree.
Ellen R also says hello.
Oh,
Ed Mendoza says hi from Mexico, and then asks about using Photo Mechanic instead of something like Lightroom or Capture One. Ed Mendoza, usually we think of about using Photo Mechanic in addition to those. We use those for sort of pixel editing, doing color changes or contrast, doing all those fine tools. Photo Mechanic is generally used as the step before in terms of selecting and making choices about what images you want to work on and keep, and what you might want to reject. So we like to think they work well together.
I definitely agree. And we, even in our pre-workshop materials, say if you want to use Lightroom or Photo Mechanic or Capture One, or sorry, Photoshop or Capture One, or any other tools like that, yes, absolutely. Photo Mechanic isn't a processing software; it's a editing software. And part of that vocabulary that we work with people on is like, what is editing versus processing, because editing is completely different from the catch-all term that it's usually used for. A lot of people say, oh, I'm going to edit my pictures in Photoshop. Well, you're actually processing your pictures in Photoshop, and you're editing your pictures with an editor. People like to use the word cull, which cracks me up because especially the wedding and baby industry uses the word
Mm-hmm.
cull, and I'm like, do you guys know what the definition? Like, as an Ohio girl, like, do you know what the definition of culling is? It's murder. so,
Right.
so we don't use culling as much, but that's exactly what it is. And like, for example, um, what we do with the photographers on our workshops is, we'll say, okay, we explain the widget here, the hide and reveal tool, to say, okay, it looks like we've got a number of pictures highlighted. Let's see which ones we want to start using. And so, we hide color class none. All right, cool. We're going to hide the blue. I'm going to hide all the student ones. We're just going to go with the ones that were selected in green from Momenta. Cool. We still have 100, 98 other images in there.
Mm-hmm.
We're just going to be looking at these 13. Let's take these 13 and get them down to like the best 10 or something along those lines. And then typically what we recommend is, highlight all of them and then press that Command E to go and process them in, your processing software of choice. And part of our folder, that was the other thing that Mick and I were talking about beforehand, is that concept of folder naming and
Mm-hmm.
file systems. So our filing system actually has a hierarchy where, I think with Macs we can do this, where it color codes all of the greens are like our big edits selects. But then when we really like something, we might say, okay, we really like this one. I'm gonna color this one blue, and really love that image and we're going to go with that image. So we reveal all those blues. Great. These are our final selects. These are the ones that we're going to send to the client. But we know that the greens in our wider edit are still there. We've just picked, the blues, and then these are our alternatives. So if anyone ever comes back and says, like, let's see if we want to add a couple more pictures, we know that the green color codes are in there. And it allows us to really be able to hone in so that when you're opening it up in Lightroom, you're not opening up 30,000 pictures, you're only opening up 13 or 10 or, whatever that is. And that's so helpful to people who've been only using one program before. So the idea of using multiple ones, I know, is a little frustrating at first to kind of get used to that workflow, but I think that's why they call it workflow. David Reichs probably agree with me on that. Like it's work and it's supposed to flow seamlessly into each other. And there are actually some really incredible YouTube videos out there, right, Mick, about like from Photo Mechanic to Lightroom to Photoshop and different, ways that people use their workflow. It's so helpful.
Yeah, I'm still refining mine. I learn something new almost every time and add it to my own workflow, and I feel like I'm getting pretty quick.
Yeah. That's the whole point, right? It's to speed it up so that you're spending a lot less time in front of the computer than you are out shooting. I think that's the key to using Photo Mechanic. Are there any other questions? Am I talking too much about flow?
Bruce Murray says, take a workshop with Jamie and Momenta. Best learning experience you will ever have. So that's
Bruce Murray, you're the best. Bruce actually took our Project New Orleans workshop, which is, just that's the workshop of my heart. And then he also came and did our one-day workshops as well, that we had at Focus on the Story last year. And those workshops have actually just started going online since we're all at home ready to learn. And so I appreciate it, Bruce. Thank you so much. We loved having you. You're just such a bright, shiny face in all of those fun show pictures that are marked in yellow, as you saw.
I think that leads us into sort of the next topic I wanted to cover is the educational things that Momenta's working on, that you are moving things online.
Sure. Do you want me to get out of there?
Sure, yeah.
Okay. Or I can just keep sharing pictures from Momenta world. In fact, why don't we do that? I'll just keep showing the pictures that are in the slideshow because they're stunning.
I think
what I'm going to do, everybody, is I'm going to unclick all the ones that are hidden because your images don't go away. So and when we get done with an edit, this is actually a really great part of Photo Mechanic. When we get done with an edit, typically what I'll say to somebody is, let's see what you did today. And that's why I love the quick keys. Like if I have somebody just posted on Twitter the other day that I want to say like one of the software programs, when they did their latest update, they changed all their quick keys and it like sent these photographers into a complete tizzy. I wouldn't know what to do if, Command L wasn't the slideshow. Like, that would freak me out if you guys ever did that. So I'll typically say to a student, like, hey, let's see how let's see what your work looked like today. And so this is a really great feature for anyone who hasn't used it. It's the slideshow settings. You can put text like captions on top of the slideshow, but you can also wait for a space bar to continue or every 2 seconds. And then it just allows you to even apply the crop, which I've always found really nice during a one-on-one editing, because we'll say like, take a quick look at the contact sheet on where the crops were, and then let's see how they look full screen in the slideshow. Because a lot of times, I think while it's very great to be able to look at something in a contact sheet, there's a lot of distraction in all of this world. Next thing you know, notification pops up, whatever. But when you can go to that full screen and really be able to just see the image isolated, I think is a really great way for people to see the quality of work that's there. And then, we'll just kind of scroll on through and talk about the images and what they did that day.
And one of One of my favorite things in 6 that we just added is if you're looking at a slideshow, you can start adding colors or ratings during the slideshow. So if you're like, oh, you notice something and like, I want to make sure add that to the pinks or something, you can do that during the slideshow. It's something you weren't able to do that in 5 and before. So
That's so awesome. That's so nice. um, So yeah, well, Momenta right now, to answer your questions, we have a lot of programs coming up with our new Momenta Live. So we have started virtual classrooms and we're doing small groups. We're still trying to keep it nice and small just because we know that being on a Zoom call or, GoToMeeting call with like 50 people is not the easiest learning environment. And we want to make it so that people can still ask questions and they can still interact with our guests that are coming in. So last month we had our Get Funded program, which is all about fundraising and understanding how to choose your right personal projects that you want to try to fundraise for, assessing if those are ready to go and ready to start fundraising, and then how to come up with a strategic plan for that fundraising. And sort of some of the things that you should think about along the way. We also have our marketing for photographers program, which is really great. We had guest speakers who came on both of those programs, including John Harrington, who wrote Best Business Practices for Photographers, the Bible of freelance. And we had Allison Zuka, who is a photographer in Los Angeles, who works for like the New York Times and Washington Post. And amazing photojournalist who came in and talked a little bit about how she built up her client base. Henry Berman, who is the CEO of Exponent Philanthropy, came in to talk about fundraising and grant writing and how to make sure that your projects kind of stand out when you're doing those type of promotions. And then coming up in May and June, we'll be having those two again, just because we had a lot of people who couldn't attend at the time. And then we're also going to be doing a specific marketing for nonprofits, which is a program that really focuses not just on a broader marketing strategy, but how do you find those nonprofits that can afford to pay you? What are you looking for, to get your name out there, establishing your marketplace, understanding your strategic campaigns, things like that. And then we'll also be doing a bunch of other information. So we kind of tell everybody to take a quick look at our website and also sign up for the newsletter. There's a bar right at momentaworkshops.com. So you can just go right in and find out what the latest programs are and, when the signups are and if they're closing soon or if anything's sold out, if there's a wait list, et cetera. And the other part of our Momenta Live program is we're launching our mentorship program this month. So we're doing small cohorts of 5 people with 1 mentor, talking specifically about a project or a goal set that they want to achieve. And we have online group meetings, but then there's also a one-on-one session for everyone built in every month. And then there's a number of other components so that people can kind of share information, and they have a bunch of different software and platform tools that they're going to be educated on. And those programs will be starting in May and June, and then they're going to be expanding as we go through the year. So it's really a way to kind of keep that intimate environment that you get on a Momenta workshop of being able to work one-on-one with an instructor, but you also kind of get that camaraderie of being there with 5 other people and being able to kind of get to know each other and share information and create that Momenta family that we have.
that's fantastic. I'm such a fan, and that's great to hear. I can't wait to hear how it goes.
It's so far, it's been so much fun. I mean, it's honestly, the first 2 were great. And we started a couple of different photographers have been working with us in the beta testing of the mentorship program. And it's been going wonderfully. Their projects are phenomenal. They really are. They've been really great. So I'm excited to see how this new learning environment grows for everybody.
Right. I mean, obviously, this situation with quarantine and COVID-19 has really been hard on a lot of people. But I think it's also given us a little bit of space to try some new things. And one of the silver linings is sort of discovering new ways that we can we can connect. For a lot of people who couldn't connect face to face even before this, and now we're kind of developing these programs and ways to stay dialed in. And it's I like to see the bright side, and I think that's one of them.
I agree. I think we're in this heyday of learning right now, which is fun. Like people are able to join programs from around the world. Like the last program that we did had, someone in Colombia, someone in Portugal, I believe, or Spain. Either way,
Mm-hmm.
like Europe. We had people from all around the country, Canada. I mean, it was phenomenal to see that those people they wouldn't necessarily fly to a major city where we're operating one of our in-person one-day seminars, but they had the opportunity to do it online. I mean, I felt terrible for the guy who was in Europe. It was like 11 o'clock at night or something like that when we finally got done. Couldn't believe he was still awake. But, it's broadening our ability to communicate. And that's what we are. Like we're storytellers and we're communicators. So I think this new environment, to look on the positive side, is really a great way to kind of focus in on some of those skills that we've been, maybe neglecting for a while. I mean, I don't think everybody's quarantine goals were probably met.
Right.
Like, I'm going to work out every day. And although you're learning how to play the guitar, right? So that's
I'm
pretty
trying.
cool.
It's going pretty slow, but I'm enjoying it.
And then in terms of our in-person workshops in the fall, we still are planning to go forth as the country starts opening back up. The one thing that's most important to us, though, is the safety of our participants and our staff. So, as people might have seen on social media, we carry PPE with us on all workshops in different varying levels. On international workshops, especially to some of the places where we've gone, we carry like actually pretty intense medical grade type of protection. But we decided, I should say, my co-founder Chris Anderson wanted to donate all of that to our local first responders here. So we will be purchasing it again now that it's coming back in stock. But we wanted to donate, make that available to them. But we will be carrying that with us, obviously, masks, gloves, disinfection, all that other good stuff. And I would say that for everyone in the learning environment, in the in-person learning environment, it's going to be different for sure. And yet at the same time, I think it's opening up a lot of opportunities. But for what Momenta does, especially, working with nonprofit organizations like the images that you're seeing here, especially, our mission for 12 years has been to train humanitarian and documentary storytellers to work with nonprofit organizations and tell the stories that need to be told, that might not be that front page news, but are valid and important and should be out there to the public. And what I think is so special about Momenta is we don't have to change our mission in this environment. That's exactly what we've been doing all along. We are perfectly ready to go forth and document these programs and our nonprofit partners around the country. And we're ready for it. And we're going to do it as safely as possible. And we don't have to change our mission because it's always been this way. And so really what our mission now is photographing recovery and how those nonprofits are going to stay afloat and keep their clients supported and the way that they need to be supported. And they're going to be ignored probably in many cases for other services. So we think that it's a pretty challenging and noble mission, but we're ready for the challenge. And we've got 12 years of experience to kind of get ourselves to that next level. So we're excited, and I'm excited to see our students again and the nonprofits again.
Yeah, I mean,
sure.
there's going to be a whole lot of new stories to tell, and as travel sort of continues to be restricted for a lot of folks, the need for visual storytelling, I think, is going to take on a whole new dimension to bring those stories to people who can't go there and can't experience certain things that, I think it's not. We're going to returning to an age where a photojournalist or a video journalist will be more crucial to telling the story of everything from a sporting event to world events and historical events.
I 100% agree. Yeah, I totally agree. I think that, you know, I think everyone's fatigued, of course, of the expression like now more than ever, but truly now more than ever, nonprofit storytelling is vital because there are a lot of people who are going to get left behind when policy is being made and when, you know, policy is being enacted, or even just financial considerations are forcing them into situations that they've never been in before. And, if we were just dealing with a pandemic, okay, but we're dealing with a pandemic and an economic crisis and a generational crisis. And I
Hmm.
mean, this is unprecedented. And I completely agree. I think the storytellers that are out there, and I really do feel for all of our students and all the photographers who are struggling right now, because I don't know about you, but like I've always kind of considered myself one of the helpers, and the concept of me wanting to like run out the door and just do something, anything possibly that I could possibly do to help anyone, is so strong. But at the same time, I know the most helpful thing I can do is not get sick
Yep.
and create more burden on the healthcare system. And so I think that's frustrating for storytellers like us. So that's why I think photo mechanic is so important right now, because then you can start working on your archive,
Yeah, but
doing
you're
all
so
that busy
right.
work.
Yeah, that's so true. I think our role will continue to evolve. Like right now, the most valuable thing we can do is kind of stay home, but eventually that will change. Like we'll start to do, and then all this will become more relevant. Let me just go back into the chat and see if we have any more
Sure.
comments. Catherine
Yeah.
Carter says, "Hey Jamie, I learned something today, but we don't know what that was, but we hope it was
Well,
good."
I'm so glad, Catherine.
Jeff Vogan says that the images are really nice.
Oh,
And
thanks, Jeff.
Sky asked to talk a little bit more about the Find feature. Sky, I think I'm going to do a Workflow Wednesday live, maybe next week, more about using Find and search and all that within photo mechanics. So we'll cover that soon. Yeah, I think that about does it. Yeah, so Jamie, thank you so much for joining us. Is there anything else you wanted to touch on before we wrap this up?
Um, I would say that, I hope everyone who's watching from afar is safe and keeping secure. And if they have any other questions that they want to ask me, I'm available on Facebook and LinkedIn. You can also email info@momentaworkshops.com, and that will find its way to me if you address it to Jamie. That'll get there as well. And our social media handles are, I think, going to be in the show notes, so I don't have to list all those. But we're on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter and all that good stuff, and you can um, take a look at some of those things. And I highly recommend following, Momenta's feed, of course, following Camera Bits' feed. The Workflow Wednesdays are so helpful, and the newsletters are really a great reminder to tell people on your newsletter to like, don't forget we did a new Workflow Wednesday, and I learned something new every single time. You should hear me in the office when it comes in. I'm like, wait, I thought I knew everything about photo mechanics. So
And I have to say, your Friday check-ins that you do on Facebook about good stories that you've heard that week or good things that have happened, those have been really inspiring. I really love that you do that, and it puts a smile on my face. And when things can get dark, it's a good reminder that there are positive things out there.
well, thanks. Yeah, if anybody wants to follow the hashtag on Facebook, it's Best Things Friday, and I just ask people to chime in with the thing that was the best thing that happened to them that week, and just you can share pictures, you can share something, and I always am really, I've always really touched when people will write in and say, I don't have the best thing that happened to me this week, but I really appreciate being able to see everyone else's.
Hmm.
And people will write me privately and say, I hope you don't think it's bad that I didn't say anything. And just to let you know, I can only tag 100 people. So I just pick 100 people at random. But anybody can chime in. You're more than welcome to, if you follow me on Facebook, chime in and share your best thing and share your best pictures. And it's a lot of fun. And I always love seeing when friends like you, Mick, chime in, and sometimes strangers, and it's
Hmm.
always great. So I appreciate that. Momenta hopes to be a bright beacon of hope, and I'm glad I can help carry on that tradition because I think we need a little bit more of that in this world.
Agreed. I think this will be the best thing that happened to me this week. Was chatting with
Oh,
you.
thanks. I think me too. And I would say if anybody wants a really positive message, my last shout out would be my co-founder and husband, Chris Anderson, wrote a really beautiful blog post on our blog that's titled "Where Will You Be When This Is Over?" And I think it's one of the most thoughtful pieces of clarity that I've read during this entire crisis. And we've had so many people write to us and say how much it changed the way that they were looking at the situation. So I would say go to momentaworkshops.com, click on news. It's the very first article up there. And I think it's a great way for photographers to kind of think about how they want to position themselves for the recovery effort and how to find yourself in a good place. So thank you so much for having me, Mick. This was so awesome. This is a great way to spend a Wednesday afternoon.
Oh, thank you, Jamie. We're lucky to have you. And that was a great way to end it. So I'm going to sign off. Yeah, we will be back. I will be back next Wednesday for another Workflow Wednesday Live. I think it'll be on Find and Search just for Sky and whoever else was to tunes in. So thank you all and see you next week. Cheers.